Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Grossgasteiger. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion / Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from an archive of our own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 17. Halbarden had only been able to linger a day or two past midwinter before his duties in the north had drawn him away. Elrond had watched the man's disquiet grow. Clear in the way he had struggled to be still, walking in paths that led into the valley as if he could summon Muckler to them by the power of his watchfulness. Elrond worried too, fretting as the hours passed without a word of his arrival in the valley. For all his blithe words to the ranger, he had not believed that Muckler would lightly play truant with his obligation, or rather, he did not believe that Muckler would leave the ranger with no word. Could he believe that Muckler would again leave him? Of course he could. Things that had happened before could easily happen again. Perhaps Elrond should have been numb to this kind of grief, but the pain of being left behind still pricked him as deeply as ever. The ranger was a soldier, and while maybe soldiers did not feel the loss of their comrades less keenly, they learned to carry on while they bore it. He said little to Elrond before he left, both of them trapped in their inaction by duties they could not deny. He had begged that any news be sent to him as quickly as could be. Elrond agreed, still feigning unconcern, lest his own worry swallow him whole. "Oh, the mountains? And in winter?" Elladan had asked, a gleam in his eye at the promise of a challenge. "No," said Elrond. "I think the gap will serve you better, at least for your departure. Isengard is where we shall begin the search, in hope that it may also be the end." He bowed his head. "Powers grant you to find the son of Feanor there." "As contrary and ill-mannered as ever, no doubt," said Eberhard, raising his hands apologetically at Arwen's look. "You do not think that they will, though, do you?" "I do not." He looked at her. "You spoke with the son of Feanor. I need not ask what you found to say to each other, do I?" "You do not. I heard the way he spoke of the Dunedain. If he did not return as soon as he was able, then this is not a simple matter of a message gone astray." Her eyes, so much like her mother's, were keen on his. "Should you not tell Halbarden of your fears?" "He shares them already." "Maybe," she said. "Even so, it may do him good to know that he is not the only one who fears for one he loves." "Or it may sharpen that fear into guilt, for he cannot abandon his duty, not while the son of Arathorn tarries in the south. He has my leave to think ill of me if he wishes." He did not miss the flicker of look between his children, but he ignored it. "When we know more, we shall tell the ranger. Not before." It was Elrohir who first returned from Isengard with news, while Elladan travelled on to Lothlorien. "The son of Feanor did not reach Isengard, so saith Saruman." Elrond had already broken the waxen seal of the letter, afraid that if he waited, he might never read its contents. "Sit, please." He gestured as he scanned the words within. "My brother of the White Council, Elrond, son of the Mariner, Lord of Imladris. I was pleased by the unexpected opportunity to entertain your noble sons, but must confess surprise at their errand. To answer their question, I did request that the son of Feanor visit me after his time with the Lady of Lothlorien was concluded. His enthusiastic promise to aid the council at need was in my mind. It was only a small thing, but I had thought he might help me with some records that I had found within a hidden chamber of Orthanc. As you know, even I have not yet learned all of the secrets of the tower. They were supply manifests, The sort of thing that the unlearned might find boring, but as you know, are the joy of the lore master. I had a reason to think that they may have dated from that ill-fated union, and counted myself lucky to have made the acquaintance of one who would have been there. To answer their question, Maklar did not arrive, but I did not remark upon it, for it did not seem to me that the absence of one so unreliable would be a matter of concern. I may have erred, but the rest of the council, against my judgment if you recall, seemed ill-inclined to seek any additional guarantee of his conduct. The news that he also has not returned to Imladris is of great concern, and I wish now that I had spoken sooner. Many dangers may befall one between here and Lothlorien, if we are so trusting as to believe that he indeed intended to come to me. I think, though, that misfortune upon the road is the lesser danger. Again, I beg you to consider my words at our last meeting. This would not be the first time that our enemy has used the return of one thought lost to work evil among those who love them. There was more, of course, but Elrond did not read it. Indeed, he only noticed that he had crumpled the letter in his fist when the stiff parchment pressed its corners uncomfortably into his palm. Elrohir said nothing. "There is something not right here," said Elrond, casting the letter upon the table. "What did the wizard say?" Elrohir asked. "Maklar did not come to Isengard, and Saruman is very eager to have us regard his absence with suspicion rather than concern. There is a lie there, or maybe a half-truth. I think he knows something more of this matter." "Surely you don't suspect Saruman?" Elrond paused. "Those are hard words to say of someone who has been a long ally. Say rather that it would not be the first time that he has failed to share information. He may have a good reason for doing so." He paced to the window, drumming his knuckles against his lips, then turned. He had barely looked at Elrohir, too distracted by the news he hoped to hear. He opened his arms then, and embraced his son, the scent of horses and of the road warming his nose. "I'm sorry, son. This has been no fit greeting. Refresh yourself, then join me for a meal." Within the week, Elrohir was gone again, rejoining his brother in the land of their mother's kin. Elrond was fretful at the inaction, but he could hardly take horse with his sons and leave the valley. Arwen sat with him often, for she, too, awaited news from the south. Indeed, it seemed destined to be a year of waiting. Elrond sometimes thought that the world must be holding its breath before it plunged into some uncertain doom. Spring had begun to flood the valley, a rising tide of green that began at the floor of the forest, and crept up the shrubs and vines to blossom at the tips of the trees when his sons returned. He was walking with Arwen amid the blossoms of the orchard when they came to him, their faces grave, and bearing a burden wrapped in cloth. "Father," Elrohir said, "we found this at the shores of the Entwash." Elladan drew back the cloth. "It is Maklar's harp, is it not?" Elrond drew breath and reached out to touch the ruined pillar. "It is." Arwen placed her hand on his arm. "Are you certain?" Elrond nodded. He had seen it enough in his childhood. "We found nothing else," said Elladan. "We searched upriver for many miles, but there was no sign." "This need not mean that he is lost," said Elrohir. "No," said Elrond, surprised at the harshness of his voice, surprised at the anger, which was the first feeling that rose with him at the realization that he had been left behind yet again. "There is nothing else it can mean." A breeze stirred bright blooms in the trees, and his children watched him with bright and worried eyes. "Excuse me, I think. Excuse me." He left them there beneath the blooming trees. It was Arwen who sought him out, and Elrond wondered, as he often did, what scheming had happened between his children in order to reach that decision. He should have gotten used to being outnumbered by now. He and Celebrian had joked about it often enough, but that sort of thinking would have him in the grip of a sharper loss, He had no time to entertain it now, but it was hard when his daughter had her mother's eyes. As it transpired, Otto had come to remind him of his duty. "We should send word to the Dunedain," she said, "for the son of Fëanor was a friend to them." She sat beside him, her hesitation speaking loudly between them. "Speak your thought, my daughter." "Are you certain of his death?" she asked. "I would know if you were slain. I think that you would know if my grandmother had departed. Forgive me for asking, but is it not the same? Would you not know the loss of his mind?" He shook his head. "I would not. The sons of Fëanor closed their minds to all but to each other many years before my birth. Maglor opened his mind to me only once." His lips stretched in a more grimace than a smile. "We did not try it again." Elrond had been a child, still frightened of his captors, even after he had started to believe that they did not, at least, intend to slaughter him and Elros without warning. Mathers had frightened him with his height and his scars and his silence. He had watched the twins with a strange intensity, as if he could turn them into someone else if he only willed it enough. Elrond would only later understand how the guilt over the loss of those other children, the uncles that Elrond would never know, had consumed him. As frightening as he was in appearance, Elrond and Elros learned quickly enough that his guilt made him safe, even kind. Maglor had been different, less predictable, indulgent and frightening in quick succession, and Elrond had been afraid of him for a long time. Maglor was the one who had found them, who had taken them from the side of the battle, his spear still wet with the blood of the people twins had loved. Maglor had always been the less predictable of the two brothers. He had been quick in both laughter and anger, and Elrond had eventually come to understand that the decision to take them had not been the culmination of some long thought-out plot, but rather one of Maglor's impulses, to be justified only after the consequences were felt. Elrond and Elros had been cherished, the children of a lonely young mother who had already seen too much loss, and had held no part of herself back from her children. They had shared her fears, her griefs, perhaps more than they should have. They had also shared their small triumphs, the joys of each day. The touch of another's mind was something that he had been accustomed to, the idea of holding part of himself back alien to him. He supposed that he could have learned the skill in time anyway, but when they first came among the brothers, the silence of their minds had frightened him more than anything else about them. He had thought that they were wounded, that perhaps there was something missing in them, that this had been why they were able to do the things that they had done. He had wondered if it could be fixed. He had thought that maybe it was the jewel, that maybe it was why they were willing to go such lengths to take it back. Being a curious child, he had asked, despite his fear. He was only once answered with words. "You do not wish to know what is in my mind." Already, Elrond had come to believe that if something was wrong, then it must be his responsibility to fix it. Why else would he have been spared when so many others perished? Why else he not have gone with his mother? So he reached out, again and again, seeking the threads of thought that would connect one mind to another. He had never tried this with Maedhros, for he believed that he would not wish to know what was in that mind, but Maglor, he had thought, would be safe. Maglor might frighten him, but at least he would not find the horrors of Angband lurking within. So one night, as Maglor sang, Elrond had sought out his mind, and Maglor had lifted his walls. When Elrond had thought about it later, he could not have said what Maglor had intended, whether he had intended to punish Elrond for his curiosity, or whether it had been loneliness. More likely, it had not been planned at all. As it was, the action proved ill-conceived, and it was long time before Elrond had stopped crying. They had not repeated the experiment, but eventually trust had grown between them with only their hands and eyes and voices to speak for them. After the death of Maedhros, he had reached out once, wondering if the one who had raised them still lived, but he had found only the same silent walls that had stymied him in his childhood, and had understood that he would never know with certainty. Now, though, he tried again, and he understood that he had been wrong. All those times before, there had been blank silence, something like a wall, like a fog. But now, when he reached out for Maglor, he found only darkness. I wondered, said Arwen, slipping her hand into his. He was important to you. He was family. Or he became family. I wish now that I hadn't spent the little time I had being angry at him. You couldn't have known. Everyone had to laugh at that. What would we have given for a glimpse to what was to come? For even the smallest warning, the slightest chance to prepare himself. I never have known. Not when it counted, have I? Arwen glanced to the door, all carved with grapevines and bees. It is no easy gift, Arwen replied, her gaze distant. Did you know? I did not. Maybe he hid himself from me as well. Or maybe I was looking in the wrong place. Time passed with little meaning in the cells of Barad-dûr. With no day and no night, Maglor floated on the waves of darkness, often unsure of whether he awoke or whether his dreams had become as dark as his world. At times, he could not even have said whether he yet lived, or whether this was at last the everlasting darkness to which the oath had promised him, but having found his voice, and with it a spark of something that was not quite hope, but perilously close to it, he continued to sing. His voice had become a weak thing already, cracked and thin, flat where it bounced back from the two close walls, words slurred on his dry tongue and bruised lips. In another life, he would have laughed to hear his pitiful efforts called song, but not now. Now, the song was a tether for his spirit, and without it, he would have floated away into the featureless darkness. Sometimes he struggled to remember why that had once frightened him, but he did not stop singing. When they came for him, he did not stop, for perhaps it would carry him through worse things than darkness.
Do you think you are Felagund to challenge me with your song?
Sauron had asked, the first time, his laughter crawling through Maglor's guts.
I am beyond that now.
It did not matter. It was not about winning. It was not the challenge, the Dark Lord on his throne. It was not even about living. Maglor had given up everything else. Maybe lost it before he came to this place. He couldn't remember anymore. He was even beginning to forget that he had forgotten, but he had found something to cling to, some piece of himself that could not be taken. Even if they took his voice, they could not take his song. Every hour that passed made it more likely that he would die there, alone. But he thought that it would be nice to go about it in his own way. It had not freed him, of course, and Sauron had not quailed before the power of the song. Beauty was no shield in this place, and Maglor had wanted to fold in upon himself, to hide from the eyes that were not eyes, and the voice that was not a voice, but he did not. He would not anymore.
I am glad.
Sauron had whispered into his ear, as Maglor had choked on blood, silenced at last. There is no pleasure in breaking something that is not whole. When I smash you now, think how your pieces will sparkle. It was not defiance. Not at first. It was a rope, a ribbon, thin and frayed, but there, a reminder that this was not all there was. There was a world beyond the darkness, and the pain, and the grating, buzzing offers that Sauron had repeated over and over again.
If you will join me, I will give you this one. I will spare that one. I ask for nothing but what I have always asked. Your love, absolute and consuming. Your loyalty, eternal and unbounded. I want to know all that you know, to feel all that you have felt. I want to be the first and last in your thoughts. In return, I offer peace. You would not have to think. You would not have to choose. Our wills would be one. You should have come to me an age ago, you and all your kin. What did your defiance gain you? Exile? Suspicion? Did you not do greater evil by denying my master? Were you not always doing his work? Celebrimbor was too proud to see it, too eager to renounce his legacy. He did not see the power I laid at his feet. He refused to see the beauty that we could have wrought together. You needn't be like that. You're wiser than he. You could lead my armies. Walls would crumble. Doors would open at your song. You could sing peace into being, and I would spare those you love. Think how grateful they would be to you.
The pleas had gone on and on until he had tired of playing the pining lover and had become himself again, to tear and ravage and burn. So it went on, the seconds stretching out in the timeless dark of his cell, the sharp intervals in Sauron's company. Even Maklar, consummate performer as he was, could not hold Sauron's attention, for he was busy, seeking something that teased at Maklar's mind, something that he thought he might have once known exactly where to find, but that he had somehow hidden from himself. He knew he shouldn't, but he found himself picking at the scab of the memory until it bled. But he found nothing more than a half-finished song about a dragon. Perhaps spurred by his new defiance, perhaps hoping for a change of heart, Sauron did not let him languish in his cell. He may not have been a valuable gift that Saruman had hoped, but Sauron had vassals aplenty to impress with his majesty and import, and if Michael could not or would not tell him what he wished to know, well, Sauron would not cast away a tool while it still had a use. They hauled him from his hole, and wrapped him in a robe of gold, and set him on a dais before the kings and the generals of the men of the south. It had become hard to stand to his full height, hard not to squint in the light, even beneath the haze of Mordor, and he had quite forgotten how to wear clothes, tugging and scratching at the heavy cloth until guards got tired of whipping him and bound his hands. It was meant to be a performance of a sort. Sauron's prize brought out for all to see, his triumph shared with all of his faithful, a threat and a promise that Sauron would cut low those who opposed him, however powerful they might be. He was a demonstration, and a little more. But Maklar had an audience again, and he could have wept for joy. He sang, and he did not stop, not when they stripped the robes from him, not when Sauron spoke over him, speaking before the masses of Maklar's crimes, not only his own, but every grievance that men could hold against the firstborn, their chauvinism, their secrecy, their suspicion. How many lives men had spent in wars not of their choosing? How many had died in the wars that the elves had begun? How many houses of men had sworn fealty to Maklar's kin, only to be abandoned, slaughtered, and not even remembered in song? How many displaced and enslaved by those who had their favor? Maklar could not call none of it a lie, except perhaps the things that Sauron promised to them. He sang, though, a lament for those fallen in battle, and it was not enough, could never be. But Maklar could remember them, too little, too late. Even as he was whipped until blood pooled at his feet, the crowd strangely silent, full of eyes that slid carefully away from his when he did not stop his song. Sauron did not bring him before them again. Indeed, something had changed in the tower, a sort of waiting, an anticipation that changed the sounds that rose through the stones, their buzzing reaching a fever pitch. Maklar lifted his voice, desperate to hear himself over the droning, wailing sounds, but they swallowed up his feeble melody. He could see the change in the faces of the guards before the back dropped over his eyes. He could hear it in the increased shuffling and whispering as they bore him again to their lord. He could smell it in the drowned corpse scent that filtered through the rough sack when he was brought before the throne. Sauron was speaking, But Makler did not listen. Not at first. For it was the things he had heard before. But then he could feel the excitement behind the words, an arousal as powerful as if it were his own, that made him believe, so when he said,
"This is the last time you shall have this chance. Deny me now, and my love will be forever withdrawn from you."
Makler had doubted himself before, but not now. For good or for ill, he was the son of Fëanor, and they might break him, but he would never bend. "I will not join with you."
"Oh, well, I did not hold much hope that you would suddenly come to wisdom. Maybe you are like your father, after all."
At a gesture, 9 figures stepped from the shadows, and Makler knew where he had smelled that scent of rank dampness before.
"I suppose you hoped that this would mean your death. No. I keep the things that are mine, and if they are taken from me, I will tear the earth asunder to regain them. You will stay here, and when the world kneels before me, and I have reclaimed all that I lost, maybe you will finally be fit to serve me."
"I will die first."
"You will wish it. You will wish for your death. You will wish for the death of everyone you love, and still I will not release you."
The voice was a stinging, crawling thing, piercing his ears, and Makler tried to twist away from the sound.
"You will live forever in my land. I have not let you die. This privileged treatment that you have enjoyed, your accommodations here in my home, that ends now. I give you to my faithful servants, and when they are finished, when you have lost all that you still cling to, you will go to the mines, and there everything you are forgotten. Special no more, nameless, hands broken by stones, voice eaten away by the fires of the mountain. We will take your feet so you can't run, and still we will make you crawl."
The 9 drew closer, and the rotten morgul scent filled his nose.
"Take him.
Sauron said with a lazy wave.
There are things I must attend to."
The golden mask, many-eyed yet unseeing, turned itself upon him again.
"I would have set you above them, you know. I would have kept you beside me, my strong voice, my well. I would have loved you. You will live in that agony until you have to see the ruin of all those that you love, until you beg for me to release you."
The eye pierced him, held him aloft in the spike of its attention.
"Do you know what I will say?"
"No," said Makler.
"That's right.
Sauron leaned forward upon the throne.
I will say no."
With a whisper, the 9 reached for him. Makler's tongue tried to fight its way to a song, but the darkness was already rising within him. Before it flooded his ears, he heard the voice of Sauron one last time.
"Bring me the sneak."
Far away, in a fair valley beneath the star-strewn sky, Elrond awoke to the sound of a shout. End of chapter 17. Stay tuned.